Good morning or good afternoon. Thanks for being here for this first session with us at Brand Innovators, driving growth through digital channels. We got a great session with Ken Willner, Chief Growth Officer of TextNow. I'm gonna let Ken introduce himself in just a second before we dive into questions. But first, my name is Joe Hall. I'm the co-founder of Spaceback. Spaceback is a creative technology platform that makes it easy for brands and marketers to distribute their social media posts across the open web and traditional banner placements. Check us out at spaceback.com. All right, now that that's out of the way, Ken, how are you doing today? Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Doing great, thanks, Joe. So Ken Willner, Chief Growth Officer at TextNow. Growth really takes on two dimensions, sort of a lofty title for both growth in terms of user growth and really driving marketing to that effect, and growth in terms of revenue growth, particularly around building our ad revenue base.
Awesome, that's super helpful. For those of us who are less familiar with TextNow, why don't you kind of just give us the kind of 1-2 punch for that?
Yeah, TextNow is a really interesting company. So we're an 11-year-old company that was founded around the idea of making mobile phone service affordable for all. And the concept was really around that, 11 years ago, and even today, arguably, basic phone service, calling and texting, is not widely affordable for everybody. And so the mission of the company is to provide both primary and secondary phone service to people for low or no cost, both through calling and texting.
Awesome. That's super interesting. I was not familiar personally until recently, so thanks for that intro. How long have you been with the company?
Yeah, so I just joined about 9 months ago, which was a really interesting time. And what attracted me to the company was this purpose-driven, mission behind the brand. And it's quite interesting to join a company in the middle of a pandemic, particularly a company that's helping underserved communities and people who need free phone service in a time where that's pretty prevalent. So it's been a really interesting and inspiring ride so far.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen some. I'm sure the first 8-9 months have been interesting. I'm sure as things are opening up, that's going to be even more interesting as things change. What are some of the marketing channels that you've seen some of the most growth to date over the last year?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. We're a subscription service, and one of the things we're learning is as you to attract new users from new pools of users, I should say, we really need to explore more upper funnel type of channels. So we have been, over the past year or so, experimenting with television, both streaming and both connected TV and linear. And we've been doing a bunch of work also on new social channels. About 3 or 4 months ago, we started working with TikTok and working with influencers specifically on TikTok, which has been really a revelation. We're starting to see some very strong growth from those channels, and we believe we're pulling in groups of users that we wouldn't normally get through performance channels.
That's super interesting. I'm gonna double click and press pause on that TikTok for just a second if we can dive in.
Yeah.
You mentioned influencers real quickly. Have you done any more traditional type ads on TikTok, or have you only worked with influencers to date?
Yeah, so it's actually a combination of both. So what's interesting about the TikTok platform, and we have been working closely with the team over there, is that their view, and it seems to be holding up, is that the most effective way to use the platform is to do ads through influencers. So try to create some more organic type of content that is, really a content-driven ad, and it's recorded and produced by the influencers and then distributed across not just their channels, but amplified across TikTok. And we found that to be pretty effective. We've done some pretty unique things and are starting to build a library really of this content One of the other areas that we're examining is being a content creator ourselves. So we're looking for ways as we expand beyond our core audience, we're looking for ways to attract new users in sort of non-traditional channels. So even producing content and distributing that, across social and potentially other channels. So one example of that is we learned through our first party data that an emerging use case for our product is dating. So people want a free second phone number to be able to use it for privacy purposes and safety purposes when they're dating. So we're examining creating a dating show, creating a short snippet-based social dating show, and working with a company in LA called the Underground Group to help us do that. So we're experimenting with a lot of different ways to use those channels in the most native and organic way that we can.
And that makes a lot of sense. A lot of experimentation, as things change and testing the waters is in relation to TikTok. I found some brands, are hesitant of how to engage in the conversation. Influencers is a natural way to do that. Was there any hesitation in TikTok and how it would impact your brand? Would any consideration on that front? Because I know a lot of people sometimes are hesitant how to get involved with TikTok.
Yeah, well, and even beyond TikTok, sorry, we're on Snap and Instagram and all the core social channels. I think you have to let that go. My view is, the brand has to be owned by the users at the end of the day. It has to be owned by your customers. It's, we're making a suggestion really, but it's really how they use it and how they embrace it and how they own it. And, particularly in social, I think you have to let that evolve and emerge. So we were okay with that. I mean, of course, we provide guidelines and we talk about how the product, the benefits of the product and the value proposition and so forth. But really, we let the influencers in this case sort of own their sort of creative expression around that brand.
Awesome. I think that's super helpful. Yeah, as people are considering TikTok, like I said, I think that's one that people are maybe less familiar with and more brands are diving into. So that's good information. If you have any more thoughts on that as we go, please share, because that's one that I'm eagerly interested in.
Yeah, well, I'd be happy to share if time allows some of the content. It's pretty fun.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, let's definitely make sure we do that then. I'm sure we'll have time. So talk about the customer experience a little bit. Obviously, part of growth is kind of getting people in. How do you handle customer experience? When they're on a platform, how do you see that fitting into the growth story?
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, at the end of the day, our service is delivered through an app, right? So we're really, that touch point is everything, right? This is the entry into the brand and into the business. So we want to make sure that we're satisfying the user at every stage of that journey. And we definitely have work to do there. We're trying to create new ways to learn more about the user needs, both from onboarding, finding ways to communicate and convey our message to that user across the journey through things like push messaging and email and so forth. But really making sure that we're always satisfying their needs at every stage of that journey. So customer experience is important. We make sure we take great pains to make sure that we're raising our scores in the app stores, and that we're making sure that customers are satisfied with the experience they get. At the end of the day, we're providing free phone service. So even though the user is not paying for it financially, they are paying for it with their time and attention. And we monetize based on that time and attention. So we want to make sure that the value exchange is satisfactory.
Yeah, that's the customer experience is always important, right? And there's lots of touch points, like you said, and you guys have an app, so that's like a great way to like engage with them and make sure that that's a good experience. So what are some telco trends maybe that are larger than you all that you're noticing or you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, so we keep an eye on the MVNO market. that's of direct relevance to us because we are a quasi MVNO. Our service runs for free both on Wi-Fi and also on cellular. So we have a relationship with Sprint that is now migrating to T-Mobile, of course, so that a user can get access to phone service, even for just basic, communication services, looking for a job, healthcare, whatever it may be, social services. A user can get access to those services both on Wi-Fi and on cellular for free. And that's really important because, we have about 10 million monthly active users today, and about half of them use us as their primary phone service. So we are, for all intents and purposes, their carrier. So we think, we look at the telco market and we look at, in particular, the MVNO space to see what new trends are happening, how companies are marketing themselves, what the value proposition is to users to make sure we're always relevant and staying ahead of that.
What do you think? Are you noticing anything in 2021 that's different than 2020, or anything that you're excited about, or channels you're interested in testing or leaning more into, or leaning out of a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really we're cautiously optimistic, like everybody, that the second half of this year is going to be, we're going to be coming out of the pandemic, hopefully in a strong economic way, at least in a healthy way for everybody. So on a macro level, just thinking about it in a generalized way. On a more micro level, we want to continue to understand how we can attract a broader user base to our service. There's two primary audiences that we think about. One is this, primary phone service, and then there's a number of secondary use cases. Another example is people who use it as part of the gig economy or as a side hustle. They want to have a second phone number for that. So as we go into the second half of the year, we're starting to think about how can we attract people who might not naturally need us as primary phone service? How can we attract them to this secondary, as a secondary phone number for various use cases? And that will involve broader marketing channels. That will involve attracting people who are not lower in the funnel.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, I wasn't as familiar with you all. I'm definitely going to check you out. Awareness is obviously hugely important to driving down the funnel. And you mentioned some TV that you all are doing. Is that something that is a little bit more recent, or tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, as we started doing TV, I want to say middle of last year, and we have seen really good results. We're particularly around organic growth. So linear TV in particular the results of that manifest through organic growth. So driving users more organically. They may come in through other channels, but they're aware of it through TV. So we've seen some pretty strong results there. We will likely amplify that going into the second half of next year. And then, of course, connected TV, because it's so measurable, you have an IP address and you can understand exactly who's coming in to your platform through connected TV. That's a real strong performer for us as well. And, one of the areas that we're understanding now is creative, understanding sort of the different creative messages, because you have to have a portfolio of various creative messages that you can run on. Even on TV, you have to slice and dice this in ways that we didn't think about years ago. You have to be really refined about what is the message for a particular network in a particular day part, targeting a specific audience that might be different than other places you're running. So we're really trying to learn and get more sophisticated about rotations and mixes in terms of creative as well.
It sounds like a lot of data you're going to need then, and to parse and understand.
Yeah, it really is. We're very data hungry. So we're trying to understand both through our first party data what our users are doing and why. And then through third-party data, what are some influences that they might have, and even getting data from our media partners, which is critically important to understand, what that journey was. Did somebody, how do we attribute a particular user or install, in our case, to a particular TV spot in a particular network? So we're learning, but it's been a positive experience so far, and we think there's a lot of growth opportunity there.
As far as creative, you mentioned obviously that's important, testing, messaging. Do you handle that in-house? Do you have an agency? How do you develop that creative?
Yeah, we use, so both is the answer. We do have an in-house creative team, but we also use external resources, agencies and production companies and so forth. So we have a combination of both. And our view is, whatever it takes to get the best, work, we're all about that.
How do you think about organic versus paid channels? Do you kind of use sort of paid to try to drive organic, or are you primarily focused on paid? How do you evaluate that?
Yeah, we definitely use, I learned this term recently, so I'll throw it out there. There's a K factor, which is essentially the multiplier effect that you get on organic from paid channels. And so we're always thinking about using our paid channels, yes, and our performance channels in particular, yes, to drive direct response and direct growth, but we're always looking for some multiplier effect on organic, and we're looking for channels that can help drive that multiplier effect, because ultimately, I think where you want to get to as a subscription service is you want to be able to lower your cost of acquisition over time, because you're driving in non-paid users to lower your average customer acquisition cost. And so we really think about how do we leverage paid to be able to do that, and what channels are more effective at doing that.
Awesome, that makes a ton of sense. Sounds like you're having some success with that in TikTok. I've seen TikTok, their engagement numbers are really high, plus the potential to strike lightning in the bottle if you get the algorithm and the right content that gets shared. I want to definitely, if anyone has questions, please submit them. Ken, why don't we, while people are thinking of some questions, why don't we share some of that TikTok content? I definitely would love to see that.
Okay, sure.
I'm a sort of a newer adopter to TikTok. I try not to go down that rabbit hole too often, but it's a little bit addictive, so I'm going to confess.
Let's see if everybody see my screen. Let's get this wider.
Yes, I can see that.
Hey man, can I talk to you? See, I had the door closed while you walking through. I know, my bad, but I matched with this girl on the app and she asked for my number. Tell me what you think. She could be crazy, she could be psycho, she could amaze me. Download TextNow, I know it saved me. So get another number for your safety.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so there's just, it's fun. That, by the way, that influencer's name is Biddle. His handle is Biddle, and he's a rapper, and as you can tell, and so we're trying to find ways that are organic to the platform, to the medium, and let them have fun with it, and really get our brand out there in new and interesting ways.
That's awesome. Before that, I love that. I love the authenticity of that, and I feel like it works for your brand like crazy. So I'm excited to hear how that goes. Let's see. One quick question before we jump over to audience questions. You mentioned the kind of like dating TV show. Is that going to be like are you going to distribute that through social? What's kind of the distribution mechanism for that?
Yeah, so we're going to put out some content called Going in 60 Seconds, which is Going stands for Give Out Your Number, which is a dating concept that we've coined. And it'll run on social channels primarily, and depending on how well it's received, and we think it'll be well received, but depending on how well it's received, we may look at other ways to amplify it.
Awesome. We'll keep an eye out for that. I'm sure everyone will.
Yeah.
Here's an audience question. When it comes to communicating with your consumers, How do you think about brand purpose? I know you mentioned that's an important thing that attracted you to this role, and how does that impact your approach to marketing?
Yeah, it's really important. That's a great question. So, indeed, if you come to the homepage of our website today, the first thing you see is we believe communication should be for everyone. And we do. We live that motto. We know that we take seriously the fact that we're providing a basic fundamental service for some people, a good portion of our audience. And so we try not to violate that in marketing. I wouldn't say that I can't point to any areas where it may have changed channels that we choose, but definitely the messaging stays consistent around this idea of whether you need phone service as a basic tool to live your life, or you need phone service for secondary uses. We want to be able to provide that to you, and we want to do it in a way that where there's trust, and you're going to get the service that you expect from us.
I can speak personally over the last year. I'm sure a lot of people can relate, like human connection, messaging. You're in that space. That's so important, and I think we realize in some ways how important that is over the last year.
Yeah.
Another question: how do you see your audience demographic expanding to be more inclusive as the industry grows and evolves?
Yeah, we actually feel really good about that. So based on our first party data, we have based on what we can infer, at least from our first party data, we have a pretty diverse audience today. So we believe that roughly 50% of our audience is non-white. We tend to skew younger. And so we're proud of that. We want to be able to serve everybody, frankly. And as we grow, we want to retain that audience, of course, but we also want to broaden and build on that audience. We take diversity and inclusion as a company really important, really seriously, I should say. And we're always trying to improve both from as an employer, frankly, as a company ourselves internally, and also we want to project that externally. If you look at our communications, a lot of our communication involves people of color, and we want to continue to project that as we grow, because that is a primary audience for us.
I think that's awesome. Obviously, it's important to be purposeful in that, right? It sounds like you guys are, and so that's awesome to hear.
Really
We've touched a little bit about some of this in the conversation to date, but a question came in: what can heritage brands learn from newer digital-first brands, which I would consider you all, when it comes to authentically marketing to Gen Z? We've talked about that a little bit, but brands that didn't grow up in that space, I find it's a little bit harder for them to make that jump.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you have to experiment. You have to be willing to, I said this a bit earlier, but I think you have to be willing to cede a bit of control as you think about, expanding into channels where the Gen Z audience is. You have to give up a bit of a control, and you have to experiment. You have to see what works, and have a culture of optimization. Constantly trying things and focusing on what works and improving it and so forth. So I think I used to work for some heritage brands, so I have a little bit of that experience of kind of wanting to sort of sort of have a one-dimensional conversation with your users, and I think it has to be multi-dimensional. You have to think about it in the ways that the users want to access and own the brand. You have to be able to be relevant with them in that way.
You mentioned that earlier, is really, the brand is in the mind of the consumers, or you said something to that effect really early on. And so just to lean into that, as well as I know sometimes at Spaceback we talk about, enabling brands to move at the speed of culture. Culture is changing, the world is changing more quickly than it was, and I think traditionally you had more time to plan things and sort of drive that narrative. And now there's a little bit of you can't always drive the narrative. You have to go where the conversation's happening.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Let's see here. Okay, another question from the audience. How do you approach emerging media channels, and how do they factor into your overall strategy? Again, a lot of these are around the same themes. So feel free to address that, and then I'll kind of piggyback on that. As you're developing content for, let's say, TikTok and some of these social channels, do you see the ability to give legs to those in, let's say, TV or connected TV? Are you putting some of that content in other places, or do you see those as completely separate kind of arenas?
Yeah, no, not. I'll take the second question first. So not at all. I totally see those as complementary, and I do think that we use this dating show as an example. If it takes off in social channels and it builds a following, I could totally see that expanding into other channels. And I don't view them as exclusive. I don't view the channels as exclusive. I do think that you want to start by, as I said earlier, you want to start by creating messaging and using the tools that are organic to a platform. So using the channels that are organic, using the communication tools that are organic to a particular platform to be relevant there first. But I think there's always elements of what you create that can be amplified elsewhere. Maybe not in their entirety, but some derivative form can always be amplified elsewhere. So yeah, we're always, I think the goal is to get to reach. You want to get as much reach as you can. And if you have something that is successful in one platform, you should definitely try it in another.
I think it's really interesting when, this dating show that you've mentioned, it's just, that came from a huge consumer insight, right? It's how people are using your product. And in some ways, it feels like a little bit of a bold, it does feel like an experiment. It does feel like a bold move to take that insight, but it does seem to be like a very deep consumer insight. Was that sort of intentional? Let's find out like how people are using the product. How did that sort of come about?
Yeah, so that came about through first party data. So exactly what you said, Joe. We wanted to understand how people were using our product, and we learned that about 8 or 10% of our users raised their hand and said they use it for dating. So that became a use case that we wanted to lean into. We've seen other use cases like folks that use it for a side hustle. So a lot of people use it for side business. They want to have a separate phone number and voicemail and so forth to keep that separate. One of the new use cases we've seen this year that's quite interesting is teachers. So as you can imagine, with distance learning through the pandemic, teachers want to keep their personal life separate from their professional life. So they want a second phone number for that. So we've done a lot of evaluation around these use cases to understand exactly how people are using our platform. And then we'll find ways to reach those people, either directly or indirectly through those channels. And the dating's a good example of that. It also drives partnerships that we might form with companies. It drives creative messaging. It drives content creation. It drives media channels that we would use. But it does start with insights about our audience and how they're using the platform.
I like that. That's a thread from an authenticity from your users, where they are, how they're using your product, trying new channels, and letting go a little bit on areas that you can let go of from a brand standpoint.
That's right.
Let's see. What about? Can you let us in on anything you're excited about from a product standpoint or a company standpoint, or tease anything out over the next year that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, we've got a lot on our roadmap from a product standpoint. We're going to do some things around video that we're excited about. We're going to continue to explore how data can play a role. We're both a buyer and a seller, so to speak. So we we're both a marketer and we're trying to build our user base. And at the same time, our primary revenue stream is ad sales. And so we think about leveraging data in both of those contexts to understand as much as we can about our users. But video, we think, has a lot of legs for us, and we're going to be doing some really interesting things, I think, around the video in the video space.
Well, video is definitely hot and has been hot over the past year. So I think that's and will continue to be. So that's exciting. I look forward to that as well, and probably has some added value in the dating world and potentially your upcoming TV show. So
yeah. Well, and I think it's important to try and find a unique spin on it. So of course, there's a lot of video chat out there today, but thinking about ways where we can differentiate with video is really important. And provide it for free. At the end of the day, we're a free service, and we want to make everything free. Frankly, we want to be able to offset our costs through by attracting marketing and advertising dollars so that we can offer the service for free and continue to layer value-added services on that for free.
I think I'm glad to hear you say that. I kind of actually wanted to ask about the differentiation from video. So that's cool that you mentioned it, because I think you're right. Like, how do you do it in a way that's authentic to you all, that's unique to your customers, it's based on data and how they use the product. So that's awesome. Are there any kind of, as we're sort of winding down here, any sort of leave behinds, from, I would say, from this current role? I know obviously you've been in the space for a while, and maybe how things have changed, but just how, where you've seen success driving growth, and just any tips for the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's trial and error. Honestly, there's no silver bullet. It's trial and error. It's lean into what's working. Definitely don't be afraid to try new things. This old dog has tried a bunch of new tricks, and I think that's important. So keep trying stuff, and when you find a spark, when you find something that's got some energy and is starting to attract a user base, particularly today. You mentioned this, Joe. You can hit lightning in a bottle without even knowing where it's going to come from. You step into something and it takes off. And I think you have to be, in order for that to happen, you have to be open to a lot of different ideas and try a bunch of different things.
One more thing before we get kicked off here, just because it popped in my brain. Clubhouse, that's an interesting space, probably less directly relevant for you right now, but even audio, Spotify, do you do anything in the audio space, or have you considered Clubhouse at all?
We have, and we've done a fair amount on with podcasts and on Spotify, Pandora, and so forth. So we are trying audio. We haven't quite cracked the code on that yet. So, but I think there's something there, and we're going to continue to try and see if it might work for some of our audiences.
That's awesome. I love that. I love the try and learn, Ken. I mean, some great tips today, and just your willingness to try and be where your customer is that's a huge takeaway for me, as somebody that can learn from this talk. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you both so much.